Hello and welcome to Wine Australia's 15 Minutes on Chardonnay. We are going to look at the evolution of one of the classic varieties in Australia. So the evolution of Chardonnay, we're going to look at the styles of Chardonnay in Australia and some of the regions where it really excels. It's kind of grown everywhere, but there are some specific regions where it really excels. So how it's evolved into this classic variety. There were early commercial successes. Many people think of Shiraz when they think of Australia and Australian wine, but actually it was a Chardonnay that put us on the map internationally. It was a Chardonnay from the Hunter Valley that won a big award in London in the 80s, and everyone was talking about Australian wine. The style in those days and for the subsequent couple of decades was pretty much fun and affordable. That was the focus. There were some really classic wines made at the same time, but it was all about fruit and flavor and sunshine in a bottle. So what actually changed? What was the evolution and what made Chardonnay, as it stands today, one of the classics and one of the places in the world to look for premium Chardonnay? Kind of break it down into what happened in the vineyard and then also what happened in the winery. We got better vine material. Some of the clones, what they call the Dijon clones from Burgundy, started to come in the mid-1990s. And we started to plant these classic new clones of Chardonnay in better and more suitable sites and better sites within those regions. In the winery, there was a reevaluation of techniques. Now, Chardonnay, as we quite often know, it is a variety that builds character and flavor through various winemaking techniques, oak aging, lees, malolactic. We'll look at all of those with a guest winemaker that we've got from the Yarra. But that reevaluation of how to apply those techniques to let the sites express themselves and the regions express themselves has been one of the key evolutions. And also oak. We love oak with Chardonnay. It's a real benefit. Oak and Chardonnay seem to go hand in hand, but how much oak you use and the type of oak you use, that's evolved without a doubt. Styles of Chardonnay, it's an adaptable variety. People always talk about it in the vineyard. It's easy to grow. It grows in warm climates, cool climates. So there's sort of not really a universal style of Chardonnay coming out of Australia. I do think there are wonderful regional expressions, but there's still some really easy drinking, fun and affordable styles as well. But we'll look at that regional expression as we work our way through the session. So looking at the different states, now New South Wales was the kind of homeland of originally great Chardonnay up here in the Hunter Valley. So there's still some lovely wines coming out of the Hunter. Excellent wines from Mudgee, a place called Orange, which is in elevation. Most of the vineyards are sitting at 900 to 1,000 meters above sea level. Cowra, Southern Highlands, Canberra districts, all names that you may not be that familiar with. And then a lovely word called Tumbarumba, some great high altitude Chardonnays from there. And the fun and affordable stuff is coming out of the Riverina. Over to the other side of the country, in the state of Western Australia, there's some brilliant wines out of Great Southern, some really cool stuff out of Geographe. Margaret River, in terms of history, reputation, and most awarded Chardonnays over the last 10 to 15 years, Margaret River has been a hotbed of high-quality premium Chardonnay. And in South Australia, great Chardonnay grown in McLaren Vale, Barossa, Clare Valley, and the Riverland. There's some fun stuff in the Riverland. But the real hotbed of high-quality premium Chardonnay right now is the elevated vineyards of Adelaide Hills. There's some brilliant wines in Adelaide Hills. And then there's the lovely island state of Tasmania. I don't know what it is about Tasmania. It just gets everyone excited, and rightly so. This beautiful island state is situated in the Southern Ocean and benefits from these cooling breezes from Antarctica, essentially. And that's what gives it the perfect sort of climate to grow premium Chardonnay. Tasmania is really a place to watch. And then Victoria, so much good Chardonnay, and we're going to focus more on the Yarra Valley in a moment. But Yarra Valley, Mornington Peninsula, Geelong, Macedon Ranges, Beechworth, Goulburn Valley, and some fun and affordable wines up in what's known as the Murray-Darling and Swan Hill. Great wines there. But actually, today's focus and more discussion on how Chardonnay's evolved generally in Australia. We've got Steve Flamsteed from beaming in from Yarra Valley and Giant Steps Winery. Welcome, Steve. Good to see you.
G'day, Mark. Good to talk to you. Yeah.
So in the Yarra Valley now, how long have you been at Giant Steps? You've been there for quite some years now, and your style sort of evolved. So it'd be nice to see how long you've been there.
Yeah, I've been here 18 years now, and you're right. There's been a bit of an evolution through that 18 years, particularly in Chardonnay. You know, when I began here, we were probably looking for not full of flavour necessarily, but wines that had a bit more thickness and sort of palate weight to them. And I think in the last sort of 5 to 10 years, particularly, we've been working very hard on kind of refining that style down to something that's much more what you and I talk about as being minerally and elegant, which is kind of the Yarra Valley.
That's
what
awesome.
it does extremely well.
Well, we're going to focus on Yarra in a moment, but I just want in general, do you like, I mean, they say that it's an adaptable variety, and that's true. We know that Chardonnay is produced in all sorts of areas of the world, never mind Australia. Do you find it easier? They say it's adaptable in the vineyard. Do you find it easy to work with? Do you enjoy working with it in the vineyard?
It's my favourite. It's my favourite grape. That and Pinot Noir would be the two faves for me. But if you think of the years we've had in the last 18 years, it's been quite a roller coaster. We came out of 10 years of drought into 2011, which was the coolest, wettest year on record. And then, since 11, it's been kind of all over the place. Every single year, there's been a beautiful Chardonnay come out of the Yarra and, arguably out of Giant Steps. And that says to me, it's a variety that is A, adaptable, but B, seems to work extremely well in the good years in a climate like the Yarra Valley. Yeah, I love making it. It's great fun. Yeah.
And then in the winery, it is a variety, as I mentioned up front. It's a variety that is well suited to a lot of winemaking techniques. And I think historically in Australia, our winemaking techniques might have been maybe a tad heavy-handed, and you saw the imprint of the winemaker a fair bit with all those techniques. But maybe talk a little bit about how that's evolved through the lens of what you've done, because I'm sure that's mirrored in other areas. But how have you changed your oak and your malolactic and your approach to lees and all those lovely things that build flavor with Chardonnay, but can sometimes be overpowering?
Yeah, look, the most important decision, and I know Dave Bicknell's big on this too, the most important decision we can make as a winemaker is that picking date. And I guess that has changed slightly. I think the picking date's a bit like when you're driving along a road in a wine growing area and you see all the grapevine rows, and they kind of, just for a second, you look right and they line up. They go out of focus and they line up. And that little line up is, for me, a really good just example of kind of like, that's the time to pick. It's a window and it's reasonably narrow.
Right.
Back in the early days of, I guess, the early 2000s, we were picking in that sort of riper window when we're in the sort of peach spectrum. Now we're kind of aiming a little bit back into that sort of melon citrus area where we're dealing with high natural acidity, but still, flavour, but not too much flavour. I mean, we're in Australia, there's lots of sunlight. You can get flavour very easily. The trick in Australia, and particularly in the Yarra, is to get it at the right point in time. We're only doing hand picking, and I think the really good producing Chardonnay wineries and areas are really hand picking. Whole bunch pressing, so we're using solids, murky juice. We are doing no clarification at all. We're going into larger vessels rather than smaller vessels. That's changed quite a lot. And those vessels may be made out of oak, they might be made out of clay. We're exclusively using wild yeast fermentation here, and that has a whole bunch of cool things going on. You get the successive species of yeast doing different fermentations and producing different flavors and mouth-filling stuff and amazing aromas, and they kind of like evolve, and then another generation or another species takes over. So this is the natural vineyard yeast that come in with the fruit. They're risky, but they can be quite exciting when they do the right thing. We're avoiding probably malo almost altogether, unless we have a freaky cold year. Malolactic is not something that we're chasing. Occasionally happens spontaneously, and if it does, we'll go with it. And we've gone right away from batonnage. I think we used to do quite a lot of barrel stirring back in the early 2000s, and I think, nowadays we probably, if we stir the Chardonnays, it might be once just at the end of fermentation. Yeah.
But the wines you still like the wines on the lees. You like the character the lees brings. You just don't want it to be overt. Is that what you mean? Absolutely.
And there is definitely a character that comes from yeast that remain undisturbed, as opposed to a character that comes from lees that have been continually stirred. So they're two different styles of wine.
And I love it too. I love what I'm seeing coming. And I think this is why Chardonnay from Australia in general, and Yarra specifically, but the great areas of Australia right now, the great regions, you're starting to see some regional characteristics. And I think it's because the winemaking techniques are a little bit more in the background. They're background noise as opposed to the foreground. And you start to see the expression of those sites within those regions and the great expressions in the regions. We're going to talk about Yarra in a moment, because that's where you live and where you work and where you love. But you must be you're obviously drinking Chardonnays from other parts of Australia. What do you like right now? What are the regions you like? And maybe even, talk about some off the beaten path ones that might be up and coming. But what are the classic regions that you like?
Yeah, look, I'm loving Margaret River, and I think there's a new wave of Margaret River Chardonnays coming out. The guys in Xanadu from Deep Woods, even Lewin is changing in style. I love the older Lewins, but I kind of really love the new Lewin estate Chardonnays. I'm mad about the Yarra, obviously. As you know, the wine community is very collaborative, and we do swap and trade quite a lot. So I know the Yarra intimately, and I think we'll talk about the Yarra a bit more, obviously. I won't shut up about it, but we are kind of singing from the same songbook. There is certainly a Yarra style that's coming out. And I think if you look at the other regions, there's certainly a Margaret River style that's coming out as well. I think regions are kind of defining the message a bit more, and I find that really exciting. You know, if we did a lineup of Chardonnays, put them on the bench, it's relatively easy, or not, it's less difficult, I suppose, to actually say that is a Margaret River Chardonnay, because there's characters, there's aromas, there's mouthfeels, there's length that seems to be associated with those areas now. But so yeah, Marg's not, and I think, you know, you mentioned Tasmania. That is such an exciting state. We're all looking down there, and there's some really cool things happening. You know, the Dredge wines from Peter Dredge, Dr. Edge.
Yeah,
there's a bunch of small producers doing their own thing, and there's some incredible excitement down there.
Yeah, and one of your mates from the Yarra has bought a property. I think he's just planting it. Mac Forbes from the Yarra has bought a property down in Tasmania as well, I understand. He's sneaking down in there.
yeah, that's right. I mean, if you're into Pinot and Chardonnay, you have to keep an eye on Tasmania, because you can't go any further south in Australia, as you said, and that's cooler and very exciting. Yeah.
That exciting. So do you think there's a regional signature? You talked a bit about it, but if there was, because I think the Yarra, for people that don't know, there's all little pockets of Yarra that are quite different in terms of elevation and overall sort of meso and microclimates. But is there a style, or does it really, a style of Chardonnay that is coming out of Yarra? Or do you think it kind of depends on the site? Do you think there's a signature flavor that expresses Yarra rather?
Yeah, there's definitely individual microclimates and obviously individual vineyards, which we all, you know, we talk about quite a lot, and that's our thing. But if you said to me, what's a Yarra, what is Yarra style? It's just lemon curd. If I see lemon curd in a Chardonnay, we see this sort of lemon, citrus, lemon peel. In the cooler years, a bit of grapefruit peel. That to me is a kind of a Yarra trait. And I think the kind of length and the elegance and that sort of, I hate that word minerality because it's so general, but that kind of like that spike or little ski jump of acid just at the end is another little character I see in lots of Yarra Chardonnay. That's generally speaking, you know, as you get up into the hills and the cooler parts of the Yarra, you're seeing a bit more of that sort of citrus spectrum. As you come down into the middle part of the Yarra around Gruyere, Tarrawarra, we tend to see a little bit more of the white stone fruit. So, but
Yeah, white peach was a flavour people talk to me about. I don't know if it's Paris suggestion, but I do pick up white peach in some of the sites in the Yarra, and I do think that's a nice character. But I love what you mentioned just there about acidity, because I think that is number one, that spine of acidity that's always defined really good Yarra Chardonnay. But frankly, I think it's something in modern Australian Chardonnay that has been where the charm and where the refreshment value lies. Even in places like Margaret River, where there's body and there's intensity and there's more weight than you might find in, say, Yarra, there is always that lime-like acidity that runs through the veins of it, and I love it. I think it's what's made Chardonnay extremely exciting. So that's it. There's 15 minutes on Chardonnay. Steve, thank you so much for taking some time. I know you've got to get back to work in the vineyards because it's morning there, and but lovely to see you, and can't wait for this pandemic to change so we can get back at it.
Can't wait, mate. It'd be good to see you. Thanks very much. Great.